refers to Jesus Christ, and yet this president is referring that to Pope John Paul II. It goes on to say, and we in our country must not ignore the words the Pope addresses to us. On his 4 pilgrimage to America, he has spoken with wisdom and feeling about our strengths and our flaws and our successes and our needs. We are also thankful for the messenger, for his personal warmth and prophetic strength, for his spiritual and intellectual gifts. And I thank all of you for building this center of conscience and reflection in our nation's capital. Who was the president that gave that speech? Our setting president, George W. Bush. And he was giving that speech at the Pope John Paul II Cultural Center dedication in Washington, D.C. in March of 2001. Ladies and gentlemen, the prophecies of Revelation are fulfilling before our very eyes, and God's people seem to slumber on. It's time to awaken and realize where we are in time. What did the Pope say about this $65 million building built in Washington, D.C.? We will come to view this as our little Vatican in the United States of America. And what is it dedicated for? It's dedicated for the spreading of the Catholic Church's teachings. Again, I want to share this picture. This is a editorial cartoon taken from the Bakersfield, California newspaper, depicting of what this man, not a Christian, sees happening in America. Here we see, once again, our Protestant presidents, our setting president, his father, former president, Bill Clinton, former president, Condoleezza Rice, Andrew Card. They're all kneeling in reverence to the dead body of the Catholic prelate who's dead and preparing for burial. And yet, as I mentioned yesterday, most of all the Catholic authorities are all standing while the Protestants are kneeling. The Protestants of the United States will be foremost in stretching their hands across the gulf to clasp the hand of spiritualism. They will reach over the abyss to clasp the hands of the Roman power. And under the influence of this threefold union, this country, the United States, will follow in the steps of Rome and trampling on the rights of conscience. Here we have another book written by a Catholic author, George LaPena and John Smalley. Catholic Power versus American Freedom. It was written in the year 2000. It was written in the year 2000. Let's take a look of what it has to say. Catholic Power versus American Freedom, written by Catholic authors. This is what it says. The time had come for the Catholic Church to come out of the trenches and take the offensive in the great undertaking of what? Conquering the United States to the Catholic faith. Conquering the United States to the Catholic faith. The First World War and then the U.S. laws restricting immigration checked the too rapid increase of the foreign Catholic population, a well-planned program of Catholic expansion. I want you to get the picture. Just prior to the First World War, there were a lot of European immigrants coming into this country. Great numbers of them, the vast, vast majority of them were Roman Catholics. They were Roman Catholics, and it was part of the Catholic Church's plan to bring in all these Catholic immigrants into Protestant America. But because of the First World War and some immigration laws, it restricted the immigration policies, and so they were not able to come in under that pretense any longer. Well, we have a problem with immigration today. Let's take a look. Special issue, Time Magazine. Welcome to Mexico. The border is vanishing before our eyes, creating a new world for us all. The article goes on to talk about all the Hispanics that are coming in to America. I have no problem with Hispanics. That is not the issue. The issue is that the Roman Church is using the same kinds of policies as they did before to begin to outnumber the Protestants in America, because 85 to 95% of all the Hispanics coming into this country, can you tell me what religion they are? That's right. Roman Catholic. Roman Catholic. Let's see what some of the issues, what it has to say. This is in the Washington Post, May 11th of 2005. Bishops chain tactics on immigrants. United States Catholic bishops yesterday launched a campaign to change the country's immigration system, saying they would reach into the pews to build support for proposals that would grant residence to millions of people here, and what's the word? Illegally. Here they're going into the churches to get support for all the illegal immigrants in the country. Why? Because they're Roman Catholic. Because they're Roman Catholic. And what do they want to do? They want to reach into the pews to give support so that America's Protestants would no longer be the majority. And give them legal rights so they can vote, ladies and gentlemen. If they come legalized, then they can vote. America's Protestant majority is about to disappear, according to the Chicago Sun-Times. Since the Pilgrims landed in Plymouth Rock nearly 400 years ago, America has been a largely Protestant nation. Again, what does Protestant mean? Protest the gas prices? Protest the prices of McDonald's hamburgers? No, it was given to Protestant, to protest the Church of Rome. Since the Pilgrims landed at Plymouth Rock nearly 400 years ago, America has been a largely Protestant nation. But as early as the end of this year, Protestants likely will make up less than 51% of the population for the first time in history. That was written in 2004. So for the first time in 400 years of history, America is no longer majority Protestant. It goes, believe that it is essential to maintain American democracy free from papal control, thought this obviously was possible only, what's the next word there? Only if Americans conscientiously were aware of the dangers of theocracy implicit in the Vatican's far-reaching influence. So here we have a Roman Catholic author that says the only way that we are going to keep our freedoms in this country and away from the control of the Church of Rome is if Americans are aware of the dangers of theocracy. Now, we should have been, and we should be a little bit understanding of what theocracy can do. When you have theocracies like you had in Afghanistan, we went over there to run the Taliban out because they had a theocracy. That's what they were trying to run there. And we saw the tragedies and how people were treated. There were no freedoms. You were forced, so-called, to be moral. And it doesn't work. It never has, and it never will. In the magazine, World Magazine, December 25th, 2004, Taliban West, secularists are in a state of panic about the role of evangelical Christians in the re-election of George Bush. They actually believe American democracy is in danger, that we are on the verge of becoming a theocracy. It's not just the secularists out there that believe that. We have an article here, a Time magazine, April 4th, 2004. Representative Christopher Shays of Connecticut declared that, quote, this Republican Party of Lincoln has become a party of what? Theocracy. Why would he say that the Republican Party is becoming a party of theocracy? Well, you remember Terry Schiavo? You remember the case of Terry Schiavo? The lady that was on support systems or for years and years had been in a coma, and the husband wanted to pull the plugs, the parents didn't want, and yet 70-some% of the population of the United States, over 70% said government need to stay out of the personal business of the family. And in spite of that, Congress came together and voted some legislation, and President Bush left his ranch in Texas while he was on vacation, left and flew back to Washington so he could sign the document, even though 70% plus of the people of the United States was opposed to government getting involved. Why do you suppose they got involved in that issue? Very simply, ladies and gentlemen, is because the Catholic Church and the religious right was pushing on the politicians to do it. And they did it. The Great Controversy, page 606. You might say, why are you sharing these things? Why do you have such a burden to share these types of things anyway? Great Controversy, page 606.